Hello and welcome back to the Healthy Not Complicated podcast. Today we're going to be talking about prediabetes and 5 steps you can take if you have been recently diagnosed. Now, if you have been recently diagnosed, it can feel very overwhelming and confusing. It can be hard to figure out where to start. But the sooner you jump on board with making changes, the sooner you start doing things to balance your blood sugar, your fasting blood sugar is going to come down and you're going to be able to reverse prediabetes. But like I said, the sooner you address it, the better. So if you're listening to this podcast, then you're in the right place. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I think it's kind of shifting, but the old thinking and what patients were told when they were first diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes was that diabetes is a progressive disease and that once you're diagnosed with it, it's just going to continue to get worse and worse. The main treatment that used to be used was insulin to treat type 2 diabetes. And because it was thought to be progressive, patients were told that they would just have to keep increasing and increasing their insulin over time. But this isn't actually true. If you make the right diet and lifestyle changes, then you can bring your fasting blood sugar down naturally and you'll no longer be considered pre-diabetic. Now, of course, if you go back to the old diet and lifestyle habits you had that got you pre-diabetic in the first place, then it's going to redevelop. This doesn't mean that you're always going to have prediabetes, because once you make the changes that we're going to speak about in today's video to bring your fasting blood sugar down, your body is going to be able to control your blood sugar better. And foods that you ate when you were pre-diabetic that spiked your blood sugar, you won't see as big of a spike once you've improved it. Now, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but the steps we're going to be talking about today, they're not gimmicks. They're not based on extreme diets. They are small changes that everyone can start today that will help to improve your insulin sensitivity, which helps to bring your fasting blood sugar down over time. And again, the faster you start implementing these changes, the faster you're going to see results. Now, the strategies in the video, they're also not meant to be used as a crash diet. They're meant to be things that you can implement into your routine, habits you can build that are sustainable. Because ultimately, yes, you can go on a crash diet. A lot of people, I know they'll try keto specifically, and because they're thinking of it as a diet, they will go on it for a period of time. They'll see great results, but then they'll just go right back to how they were eating and the lifestyle choices they were making beforehand. And they'll start to gain the weight back, their fasting blood sugar will creep back up, and they'll become pre-diabetic again. To see lasting results, we need to build these habits. The changes we make, they're not going to be extreme, but they're going to be sustainable. And that's when you're going to get those long-lasting results. Now, if it's your first time listening to the podcast or stopping by my YouTube channel, my name's Kait, and I'm a nutritionist who specializes in insulin resistance and blood sugar control. I've helped hundreds of clients reverse prediabetes, insulin resistance, PCOS, even type 2 diabetes naturally, without medication and without crash diets. I have helped so many clients get off insulin, get off metformin, and other blood sugar controlling medications. Because once you address the root cause of prediabetes, there's not a need for these medications anymore. Now, I'm going to have timestamps on the progress bar or in the description if you're listening on Spotify. So if you want to skip ahead to the steps, you can do that. But I think it's really important to start off by talking about what prediabetes is and what causes it. Because if you understand what causes prediabetes and what caused your fasting blood sugar to go up, then the steps I explain later in this video, they're going to make a lot more sense. To be diagnosed with prediabetes, you have to have high fasting blood sugar. So this is your fasting blood sugar first thing when you wake up in the morning, when you have no food in your system. A fasting blood sugar above 100 milligrams per deciliter or 6.1 millimoles per liter is considered to be pre-diabetic. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you will know that our blood sugar can fluctuate a lot, even day to day. But high fasting blood sugar doesn't just happen overnight. Prediabetes actually develops over years. Now, if your fasting blood sugar continues to go up over time, that's when you're going to be diagnosed as type 2 diabetic. Prediabetes and type 2 diabetes actually start years before your fasting blood sugar increases. And this is because at the root of your blood sugar going up is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when the cells in your body are resisting insulin. Insulin is the hormone that controls our blood sugar levels. Now, our body always wants to keep our blood sugar balanced, if you will. So we have hormones that are released if our blood sugar goes too high, that's insulin, and we have hormones that are released if your blood sugar drops too low. And right at that sweet spot in the middle, that's where your body wants to keep your blood sugar. So when you eat, that is the biggest trigger for our blood sugar increasing, particularly when you eat carbohydrates. The carbohydrates, the starches, they're broken down into sugar, and this enters your bloodstream. Now, I'm going to use sugar and glucose interchangeably throughout this video because blood sugar, blood glucose, they're the same thing. So when you eat carbohydrates broken down into glucose, sugar, it enters your bloodstream and your blood sugar starts to go up. And this is normal. This is just your body breaking down the food you ate and turning it into energy. Like I said, insulin is going to be released and it's going to take that excess sugar from your bloodstream and deliver it to the cells in your body that need it for energy. At which point you'll see your blood sugar come back down. And this is normal. This is a healthy metabolic function that happens for all of us day to day, except for type 1 diabetics. That's a whole different issue. When you're type 1 diabetic, it's actually an autoimmune condition where your body doesn't release or doesn't create any insulin. And because your body's not creating insulin, your blood sugar just goes up, 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 and it cannot be controlled. It's extremely dangerous. And that's why type 1 diabetics have to inject insulin. But the issue with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is actually the opposite. They're caused by too much insulin overwhelming your cells. So day to day, if you are eating a diet that has a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates, if you're eating frequently throughout the day, if you're eating meals, snacks, if you're snacking in the evening, your blood sugar is going to be constantly going up and down. You're going to be on this blood sugar roller coaster. And every time your blood sugar goes up, insulin is going to be released. Now, if you're eating frequently like this and you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, then the cells in your body, they can only store a limited amount of energy from sugar, from carbs. They can store a lot more as fat, but there's only a limited amount that they can store from carbohydrates. So if the cells in your body are already full, then the insulin is there trying to bring your blood sugar back down to baseline. It brings the sugar to your cells who are already full. So that's when they resist insulin. And in the very early stages of insulin resistance, your body notices that your blood sugar is still high and it releases more insulin to deal with it. That's when your insulin starts to get a little bit higher. And this excess insulin will be able to force the sugar into your cells. This will work for a period of time. This excess insulin will be able to keep your blood sugar in check. And that's why when I say that prediabetes starts years before your fasting blood sugar starts to go up, that's because you become insulin resistant up to 10 years before you'll be diagnosed with prediabetes. So what's happening in the early stages is insulin levels will be high. The excess insulin is needed to deal with all the blood sugar spikes, but your fasting blood sugar will still look normal. And this is why insulin resistance gets missed, because doctors only routinely test fasting glucose. So if they're not testing insulin, they don't know that insulin is high. And because blood sugar looks normal, they think that everything's normal. But a lot of people will start to experience the symptoms of prediabetes and do not have high fasting blood sugar, and it's because they're insulin resistant. So this can look like carrying a lot of fat around the belly, developing dark patches of skin around the neck, in the armpits, and around the groin. It can look like frequent energy crashes throughout the day, especially after eating, sugar cravings after eating. It can look like just weight gain in general. And a lot of people will go to their doctors with these symptoms and be told all their labs look normal, but really they're not looking at insulin, so that's why it gets missed. I will make a note though that you don't have to be overweight to have insulin resistance or prediabetes. Yes, a lot of people who are insulin resistant are overweight, but not everyone. And that's because it's not caused by excess energy consumption in general. It's caused by high insulin levels. Now, hopefully I haven't lost you and this is all making sense, but basically the gist of how to reverse prediabetes and bring your fasting blood sugar down is to lower your insulin levels. Because if your insulin levels remain high, then insulin resistance just gets worse. And this is why people with type 2 diabetes who are prescribed insulin injections, that's when it becomes a progressive disease. Because yes, an immediate solution to your high blood sugar is injecting insulin. Like I said, your body will do this naturally in the early stages, but yeah, it can't keep up after a point. So if you inject it, it's a short-term fix because that excess insulin will be able to control your blood sugar. However, your cells become more and more resistant to it over time. And that's why you'll have to continually increase your insulin dose. So the solution to bringing your fasting blood sugar down and improving your insulin sensitivity is to lower your body's need for insulin. And we do this in a few different ways. And that's what is going to be at the root of all the steps we're going to talk about in today's video. Because it basically comes down to if you can better balance your blood sugar, if you're not experiencing big blood sugar swings throughout the day, then less insulin is going to be needed and your cells will have a chance to become more sensitive to it again. And that's why over time, if you bring your fasting blood sugar down and you effectively reverse prediabetes, you will be able to tolerate higher carbohydrate foods better than you did when you were pre-diabetic, because your body's insulin sensitivity has improved and because your cells aren't being overwhelmed with all of this excess insulin. So let's get into the 5 steps. Step number 1 is to make sure you're getting 30 grams of protein at every meal. Protein is one of the 3 macronutrients. We have protein, fat, and fiber. And macronutrients are nutrients that we consume in the greatest amounts and that we need in the greatest amounts. So there's macronutrients, the 3 I just mentioned, and then there's micronutrients, which is everything else like fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin B12, vitamin C, iodine, those sorts of things. We consume them in smaller amounts, much, much smaller amounts. Now, when you talk about the 3 macronutrients, 2 of them, their main role is for energy. And the third, which is protein, its role is building things in your body, keeping your connective tissue, your muscles, your skin all healthy, because all of these things are built from protein. So if you're not getting enough protein throughout the day, then that's when, well, of course, you're going to lose muscle. Anyone who's tried to build muscle in the gym will know how important it is to get it in order to build muscle, but you also need to eat enough to maintain the current muscle that you have. And even if you're not in the gym, this is important. If you're not getting enough protein and certain types specifically, that's when your skin will start to sag. That's when you'll get wrinkles, that sort of thing. Now, of course, there's variance to this. There's a genetic component. Some people are more predisposed to wrinkles and that sort of thing. But in general, if you're getting enough protein in, then your connective tissue, your bones are all going to be stronger and function better. Now, the 2 other macronutrients, carbohydrates and fat, like I said, these are our body's energy source. So we've touched on carbohydrates a little bit. They're broken down into sugar, they enter our bloodstream, and the benefits of carbohydrates and sugar is that it's a quick energy source. Our bodies can use it very quickly for energy. And that's why for elite athletes who are competing in high intensity sport, carbs are so beneficial because these people require energy fast in order to fuel their movements. But for the vast majority of people who are just casual exercisers or who are sedentary, they don't need this fast energy source. And that's where our secondary energy source, fat, can be more beneficial. So I spoke about how our body can only store a limited amount of carbohydrates, but it can store a lot of fat, basically close to an unlimited, well, I don't want to say unlimited, but it can store a lot of fat. And it does this through body fat. And everyone's going to have at least some body fat unless you're severely underweight and severely malnourished. Men will have, even extremely lean men will have at least 10%, and extremely lean women will have at least 15%. And this is all stored energy, which when carbohydrates and sugar are low in the body, the body will switch to using fat for energy instead. And this is when it starts to use your stored body fat, convert it to energy, and fuel you. The downside to fat is that, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It is a slower fuel source, which means it takes longer for the body to break it down and convert it to energy, which isn't ideal for athletes who are trying to move quickly and need that quick energy. But because it's broken down slowly, it maintains energy levels over a long period of time. So for the vast majority of people, this is ideal. And the vast majority of people do have excess weight that they need to lose. And this is why limiting carbohydrates, which we'll get to a little bit later in the video, and focusing on fat and protein in your diet instead can help your body to access that stored fat while also lowering your insulin levels and allowing your body to improve its insulin sensitivity. So a bit of a tangent, but the first step was to get 30 grams of protein in at every single meal. And the reason that this is beneficial is one, it's going to help you to maintain your tissue in the body, so your muscle mass, your bone density, that sort of thing that we just touched on. But protein is also digested slower than carbohydrates. And because of this, it helps to lower blood sugar spikes from your food. So if you have carbohydrates and protein together, well, if you just eat carbohydrates on their own, like let's say you just have a banana, you're going to see a big spike in your blood sugar because bananas are almost entirely made of sugar, simple sugar that's broken down rapidly and causes a big spike in your blood sugar. But if you have that same banana with a source of protein, the protein slows down digestion. So the blood sugar spike is more gradual and less insulin is needed all at once. So if you can get 30 grams of protein in at every meal, you're going to have better blood sugar control. You're not going to have these big swings in your blood sugar. Like I said, less insulin will be needed, and that's going to help to bring down your fasting blood sugar over time. Now, on top of that, protein is also great for appetite control. The reason that protein can be so good for appetite control is because, like I said, our body relies on protein for a lot of different things. And if we're not getting enough protein in, then we remain hungry. But if we eat enough protein, this hunger switches off. And think about it. Protein by itself is very hard to consume. I don't know many people who can overeat just plain chicken or steak or anything that's just a protein source. But when you think of something like potato chips or like French fries, which are almost entirely carbohydrates and maybe a bit of fat, how easy is it to go beyond your energy needs and to just keep picking at these foods? And that's because they don't have any protein. So your body is still hungry for that protein, but it's not getting it. 30 grams of protein at every meal can really help with this. If you're someone who struggles with cravings throughout the day, between meals, if you have sugar cravings after you eat, you're probably not getting enough protein in. And when I say 30 grams, I recommend this as a starting point because a lot of people are not getting anywhere near enough, and especially at breakfast. 2 eggs, for example, has about 10 grams of protein. So if that is your only protein source in the morning, then that's not enough. You need to be eating either more eggs or pairing it with another protein source, maybe some smoked salmon, maybe some bacon without added sugar, or some sausages. Also Greek yogurt, cottage cheese. These are great protein sources as well that can help you hit that 30-gram minimum. I do have other videos on my channel on how to get 30 grams in at every meal, on how to get at least 100 grams in a day. So I'll link to one of those up above, or I'll put it in the description box on Spotify. It can feel very overwhelming at first, but I promise you it's not as hard as you think once you kind of get an idea of how much protein is in different foods. When you start eating more protein, you are going to see huge benefits for your appetite control. Like I said, you're going to see more stable blood sugar. You're going to feel better throughout the day. So this is the starting point. This is the first thing you want to implement if you've been diagnosed with prediabetes. And that kind of leads us into step number 2 you're going to want to take, which is to stop snacking. Now, we spoke about how insulin resistance develops when you're eating frequently and especially when you're eating high carb foods throughout the day. So when you're snacking in between meals, your insulin is always going to go up to some extent when you eat So you have breakfast, there's a bump. If you have a snack an hour or two later, then your insulin doesn't have time to get back down to baseline before you eat again, and then more insulin is released. And then you have lunch, it's still high. Then you have another snack, then you have dinner, then you have dessert, then you have a late night snack. Your insulin never has a chance to come back down. And if you allow yourself to just eat 2 to 3 good meals per day with at least 30 grams of protein, well, number one, you're not going to be hungry for snacks in between because you're hitting your protein target, but also you're going to allow your body to have a break from insulin. It's going to have a chance to drop down between meals, and you'll have a chance to improve your insulin sensitivity throughout the day. Because for most people, the only time that their insulin levels are somewhat low is when they're sleeping because they're not eating. So if you can spend more time throughout the day, longer periods without eating, you're still eating enough to meet your needs, you're just getting it in at your meals, then this can be extremely beneficial, and it's going to help to bring your fasting blood sugar down over time. And that, of course, ties in with number one, because if you're getting enough protein, you're not going to be hungry. Step number 3 is to eat an early dinner. And by this, I mean, if you can stop eating by between 4 to 6 p.m., if you can allow your body to fully digest your last meal before you go to sleep, this is going to help so much. Now, effectively what I'm talking about here is extending your fasting window. So your body is in a fasted state anytime throughout the day that you are, well, it's basically if you break your day up into when you're in a fed state and when you're in a fasted state. When you're in a fed state is from when you have your first meal during the day until you finish your last meal. And then from your last meal overnight until your first meal again, that's your fasting window. Intermittent fasting in general, is extremely effective for improving insulin sensitivity because, as we've spoken about, when your insulin is low, that's when your body starts to heal. That's when your insulin sensitivity improves. And if you're not eating for a longer stretch of time, this is a longer time that your insulin is low. So that is why fasting is so effective. Now, I know intermittent fasting can seem overwhelming for a lot of people, but you can take advantage of this simply by eating your dinner a couple hours earlier and not snacking afterwards. Some people also like to skip breakfast or push their breakfast back instead, and then they just eat a little bit later. It just depends what works for you. I find that it's easier to still have breakfast in the morning, have your lunch, and then have an earlier dinner than it is to skip your breakfast or push your breakfast back. But it just depends on what works for you. The other part to this is that when you stop eating at least 3 hours before bed, this allows your body to fully digest and process that food before you go to sleep, and you get into a fasted state quicker. Your body is able to recover for longer during the evening, and you sleep better. You have more deep sleep, you have more REM sleep. So many benefits for your sleep when you stop eating at least 3 hours before bed. And sleep also ties in with insulin resistance and prediabetes. We'll get to that a little bit later in the video. And speaking of making your eating window work for you, I have one bonus tip I want to add in here that can make a huge difference for your blood sugar. And that is Good Idea drinks. These are carbonated beverages that are scientifically proven to reduce post-meal blood sugar spikes. They contain functional ingredients like amino acids and chromium that support healthy glucose metabolism. They are 0 sugar, 0 calorie, and taste delicious. They're perfect for prediabetes, insulin resistance, and stabilizing energy after meals. Just drink a third of a can before a meal and sip on the rest throughout. They have been shown to reduce blood sugar spikes by up to 30%. Good Idea drinks are available in the US only. You can head to healthcoachkait.com/goodidea to check them out. And make sure to use code KAIT at checkout because that's going to save you 10% off your order. Step number 4 is to take 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar diluted in water before bed. And I love this hack, if you will. I know I said in this video we weren't going to be talking about gimmicks, and this absolutely is not a gimmick. There is a lot of scientific research that supports the benefits of apple cider vinegar, specifically for blood sugar control and lowering fasting blood sugar. And that's because vinegar improves our cells' insulin sensitivity. So if you drink apple cider vinegar before a meal, like Good Idea, it can help to reduce blood sugar spikes. But it's also effective if you drink it before bed. And it has been shown in many studies to lower fasting blood sugar numbers. And this is so easy to implement. All you have to do is drink it sometime after dinner before bed, and your fasting blood sugar is going to be lower, which of course, that's the whole point here, right? We're trying to bring our fasting blood sugar down so that we're no longer pre-diabetic. Now, I want to emphasize you do have to dilute it in water, because if you don't, it can be very damaging for your teeth. You can also drink it through a straw if you're a little bit more worried, but diluting it in water is all you need to do. Don't shoot it or anything like that. I care about your teeth. And finally, step number 5 is to walk after you eat. And this doesn't have to be some long power walk. It just has to be a 5 to 10 minute walk around the block, even through your house, doesn't matter, but just get some movement in. And this is helpful because when you're moving after you eat, your body is able to use the energy from that meal immediately. And so this helps to reduce blood sugar spikes. And it's also extremely beneficial because when you're exercising, your cells can actually take in glucose without insulin. And that is why exercise in general is so beneficial for metabolic health, for improving insulin resistance, for controlling blood sugar. There is a tipping point. You can over-exercise and that can be detrimental. But in general, this is one of the reasons why exercise is so good for you, because it helps with blood sugar control, with insulin resistance. And like I said, your cells are able to take in sugar without insulin. Now, I know some people like to do some squats after they eat, or push-ups or anything like that. And honestly, whatever you want to do can make a difference. I just think walking is the easiest and doesn't have to be intense, doesn't have to be fast-paced. You don't have to do this after every meal, but particularly if you do it after you have a really big meal or something that is pretty carb heavy, that's when you're going to see the most benefits from doing it. And all of the tips in this video, you don't need to do every single one every single day. The more of them that you can do consistently, that's what's going to pay off. But you don't need to be religious about going for a walk after every single meal you eat. It's not about that. Like I said, if it's a carb heavy meal, that's when you're going to see bigger benefits for your blood sugar. Now, I thought I had sleep somewhere on this list, but apparently I don't. So I'm going to add in another bonus tip, and that is to prioritize your sleep. Because studies show that people who are sleep deprived, people who work shift work, are at an increased risk of insulin resistance, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes, and also overweight and obesity. And this can happen after just one night's sleep. Even people who are metabolically healthy, who aren't insulin resistant, if they don't get enough sleep, the entire following day, they are going to be more insulin resistant than they would be otherwise. And they might see higher blood sugar levels throughout the day. So if you are someone who already has insulin resistance and prediabetes, then this is just going to be worse. So aim for 7 to 9 hours every single night. Be consistent with it. Make sure you're going to bed within an hour of the same time every night, and wake up same thing. This is going to help you to get better sleep consistently. And honestly, this is underrated. You could be doing everything else right, but if you're still having high blood sugar readings, if you're still struggling with your weight, but your sleep is totally off the mark, then this could make a huge difference for you. And I did do another podcast episode a couple months ago entirely on sleep and how to improve it. In that video, I also touched on shift work and how to manage that so you reduce your risk of diabetes and being overweight or obese. So I'll link that episode up above or in the description box if you want to know more about sleep specifically, because I know a lot of people are shift workers and it's not really something they can change. But there are ways you can make it so it's not as much of a negative impact on your health. All right, so let's quickly recap those 5, 6, was it even 7 steps? The first one was to eat 30 grams of protein. The second one was to stop snacking throughout the day. The third one was to push your dinner a little bit earlier. The fourth one was a bonus tip, and that was to drink a good idea. The fifth one, now I'm drawing a blank. The fifth one was to take a walk after you eat. And then the final one was to prioritize your sleep. Like I said, the more consistently you can do these, the bigger results you're going to see. And I think these are very attainable for the vast majority of people. These aren't extreme. They don't rely on cutting whole food groups out or anything like that. Yes, you do want to be a little bit smarter with your carbohydrates, but if you can use tools such as walking after you eat, not snacking, if you can choose whole foods over processed foods more often than not, then these little things are what's going to add up. Prediabetes doesn't mean you're broken. It's just a warning sign. And the quicker you can start to make the changes, the easier it's going to be to reverse. Because as it progresses, once it gets to type 2 diabetes, at that point, it does become a little bit more difficult and it will take a bit more time, especially if you have been prescribed insulin, if it's gotten to that point. Honestly, this is the absolute worst treatment. I'm not saying stop using your insulin, cold turkey, or anything like that. But as long as you're using insulin, you're not going to see improvements. Now, if you guys do want a little bit more guidance and support, I do have a 3-day blood sugar reset coaching program. This is, I was going to say self-paced. It is kind of, you go through it at your own pace, but it's meant to be broken down over 3 days. This program also includes a sample meal plan, a shopping list, and you get access to a private Facebook group where we can work together and you can ask questions and I can offer you additional support. So if you are still feeling a little bit confused, you're not quite sure what to eat, definitely check that out. It's a one-time fee and you get lifetime access. That includes the Facebook group. So any questions you have, I'm there for you. And before you go, don't forget to check out Good Idea Drinks. That's healthcoachkait.com/good idea and code Kait, can I spell my name? Kait to save 10%. Now, if you're not already subscribed to me on Spotify or YouTube, make sure to do that because I upload on Spotify to my podcast once a week and I upload on YouTube 2 to 3 times per week. So if you don't want to miss out on a video, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks guys for watching or listening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.